What's up, guys? Did you know that Wicked was a book before it was a musical or a movie? I didn't, for a long time. There are countless books and plays and musicals that have been turned into movies, but only one stands above the rest in how long its line of adaptations is, and that's Wicked. You've got the movie that came out in 2024 and made almost $1 billion at the box office. You've got the musical that opened on Broadway in 2003 and is still being performed to this day. And then, of course, there's the old source material. The 1939 film The Wizard of Oz, which was, of course, based on the 1903 musical, which was, of course, based on the original book from 1900. But I seem to have skipped one, the forgotten middleman that gave the name Elphaba to the Wicked Witch of the West and is the focus of this entire video. Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. So if you haven't been keeping track, that is book, musical, movie to get us to where we are today. And like any game of telephone that's 6 people long, there was a lot lost in adaptation. The weird thing is how the musical and the movie are so much more widely known than the book. The book sold like 5 million copies, so it was popular, but the musical was popular. And much of the book's success was due to the musical being so popular, and that does not happen often. So I'm gonna get to the bottom of why. Why hasn't anyone read Wicked, and is it worth reading? Stick around to find out, because this book gets kind of crazy. I went to the musical when I was really little, but I don't remember anything outside of somebody drinking an elixir. So I'm going to have the rare experience of reading the book before actually seeing the musical. Let's see what I thought about the first 100 pages. So for the first 60 pages of the book, you're following Elphaba's parents. You don't know they're Elphaba's parents for like 40 pages. This minister is her dad, and then her mom is just regarded as the most beautiful woman in the town. They've got some good status, pretty much, because religion means a lot in this world. But the problem is that the minister's wife is not faithful, and thus Elphaba is born this green, hideous little monster that bites the finger off the person that delivers her. We don't know who her real father is, actually, but it can be assumed that it's one of the magical creatures of Oz. Speaking of Oz, world building of this place is insane. You kind of know about Oz already from The Wizard of Oz, but also in this world there are animals, some animals with spirit. There are goats, with a lowercase g, those are just normal goats, but then there's goats with like a capital G, and they have spirit. They got the same brain function as a human, and they're like very much oppressed. So there's like this ancient history of Oz. The minister is very upset, one, because his wife cheated on him and now he has a green baby that bites people's fingers off, but two, because there is this weird religion popping up. He calls it the religion of pleasures. People just being all raunchy and rowdy, and it has a lot to do with magic and magic shows. A lot going on here. Nothing at all that seems familiar from the musical or the movie. We were just learning about the ancient history of Oz and the workings of this theocracy. So yeah, you're pretty much dropped into this dystopian fantasy world where people use religion as a political weapon. And there's this ancient belief of how Oz was created. There's the time dragon, then there's the fairy queen Lurline, then her successor is Queen Ozma, who through a line of different bodies and people, she's always Ozma and she's always the ruler, at least until the wizard shows up with his pleasure faith. There's also the ancient Kumbric witch who floods the entire land of Oz and creates evil. And then a more recent religious figure is the unnamed god, who is worshipped by the people in the Unionist religion, of which Elphaba's father is like a high minister. There is so much deep history that Maguire came up for the land of Oz, and pretty much none of it is reflected in any other adaptation. Anyway, let's see what Galinda is up to. This is the part that everyone knows. So then you're finally in college with Galinda and Elphaba, and they're roomies. Galinda is not very happy about it. They're reluctant friends, kind of, except Galinda's a jerk and doesn't let Elphaba speak to her in public. There's this guy, Bach. Pretty much he has a crush on Galinda, and Elphaba's kind of helping to set them up right now. It's just kind of a cute little college story after all of that crazy world building. There was the big time skip. So back in the day when Elphaba was just a baby, you can see that religion of pleasures growing with the magic shows. You time skip and suddenly Ozma is no more. The wizard is the one that controls Oz. I'm sure we're going to learn about how oppressive he is, because we've already heard some propaganda type announcements about animals should be seen and not heard. Oppressive theocracies are going on. I don't know if any of this is in the musical or the movie. I'm going to find out later. It's weird. It's intense. This is like the 1984 of Oz. So I'm going to read more. I have a feeling it's just going to be like a cute little college story for a while, which I can get behind. I couldn't help but notice that in the table of contents, one of the last parts is called the murder and its afterlife, I can't imagine that this book ends happily. I'll see you guys on the other side, maybe in 100 pages or so. What's up, guys? I'm officially halfway through the book, and it's getting crazy. I cannot imagine that the movie goes the same way. We just had a 5-year time skip. Elphaba and Glinda are completely separated now. Glinda graduated, and now she's like a sorceress, but Elphaba is not. Elphaba is part of some weird, convoluted, like, revolution group. That's not actually a group. The part of this book that the musical is actually based on is tiny in the grand scheme of things. This book covers like 40 years. But while we're here, let me show you the world of Oz. Because to me, this is a fantasy world that rivals Game of Thrones. At least from what I've heard of Game of Thrones. 20 comments telling me to do it, and I'll read Game of Thrones, okay? So first you've got the Emerald City and Munchkin Land connected by the Yellow Brick Road, we all know that. Plus the slightly lesser known but still mentioned Gillikin and Winky Country, which is more formally known as the Vinkus. And then there's Quadling Country, which was never mentioned in the 1939 movie, but might have been name dropped like once in the musical. But there's a Quadling at the beginning of this book that is super important because the people in Quadling Country can read prophecies from rubies, and they foresee the coming of this great evil beast, which is the wizard, and the only other person in Oz that can read the rubies to see this prophecy is Elphaba. Now, there are a lot of politics and cultures to each one of these regions, and they're under the control of the wizard to varying extents. And there are a couple more regions that aren't talked about too much, like the Glickus and Ugabo, and whatever is beyond Oz, I have no idea. But it's such a cool, expansive world, and it's introduced to you in these little tidbits, which I just think is so awesome. But let's check back in on Elphaba. Page 300. Another 7 years just went by. You think Wicked, and you think, oh, it's just about 2 witches in a school. No. So right now she's in the Vinkus. She had an affair with this guy, Fiyero, who was like the prince of this kingdom in the Vinkus, and it led to Fiyero's death. So she went to go tell the story to his wife back in the Vinkus after 7 years of being in this kind of monastery. And then on the way to the Vinkus, traveling kind of with this like mission group, she meets this elephant witch. And the elephant is like, hey, you are destined to be a witch, but also your destiny is your own. Don't let anybody tell you what you are meant to be, what you're meant to do. Which is pretty inspiring. Elphaba is just committed to taking down the wizard and giving everybody in the land of Oz equal rights. She is slowly becoming more of a witch. Yeah, I'm just excited to see where she makes the turn to evil. She's trying to teach this monkey how to talk, and she's trying to give him a spirit, which is really cool, and I hope that gets expanded on. So I'm gonna try to finish this book. I know that all might have sounded like a weird dream that I had, but it's true. Elphaba spends 5 years in the Emerald City trying to subtly fight back against the oppressive wizard. Fiyero, who is a friend from Shiz who has a wife and kids back in the Vinkus, starts meeting her at her secret apartment to have an affair. But then there's this big operation that Elphaba is part of, and she can't tell Fiyero about it, but he tries to follow her during it to figure out what's up. He eventually ends up going back to her apartment and, spoiler alert, gets killed by the wizard's army, which Elphaba, of course, feels responsible for. Now, the biggest, most important theme of this part of the book is that Elphaba keeps talking about how she doesn't believe that she has a soul. She thinks everyone else does, just not her. Which really gets you thinking, is the soul what prevents somebody from having an aptitude for evil? Because Elphaba isn't really evil. She's been fighting for animal rights and taking care of her little sister this whole book. So, was she born to be evil, or was she just kind of forced into it by the world around her? More on that later. So, to process her guilt, Elphaba goes to this church for 7 years, takes an on and off vow of silence, and pretty much just removes herself from the world for a long time. Now she basically lives in the Vinkus with her ex-lover's extended family, and this is where she really becomes a witch. Okay, I only have 50 pages left, but I gotta go take this midterm. This is crazy, crazy book. This is the biggest world I've ever read. It's so complex, it's so political, it's so dark and evil and wicked. Speaking of wicked, that midterm, am I right? UNL Electrical Engineering class of 2027. But at this point, Elphaba has all these animal familiars that she's picked up on the course of her journey. Most notably is the monkey Chistery, because she's kind of trying to make him into one of the sentient animals. He can repeat words back to you, but he can't really form his own thoughts still. Like Elphaba herself has been described in this book, he's somewhere between an animal and an animal. Another really cool thing that happens in this part is that one of the kids in the Vinkus takes Elphaba's broom and finds out that you can fly with it before Elphaba even does. And Elphaba is so bad at magic. She has no aptitude for it. Glinda's always been way better at it. This random kid in the Vinkus figured it out way before she did. What I think this detail of her being bad at magic does is prove that she is not truly the Wicked Witch of the West. Every step of her life, people have been forcing this image on her that because she's green, she must be wrong and bad. This witch title is thrown onto her by the people in the Vinkus because she has all these animals following her around and she kind of grows to fit the title. But yeah, I finished the book and it was an easy 5 stars. The world is just so cool. And I'm going to talk about the ending now, so if you don't want spoilers, go ahead and skip to the movie section. But the ending of this book is kind of what gives it that last star. By the end of the book, Elphaba's sister, Nessa Rose, has become a theocratic dictator of Munchkin Land, and then she gets killed by Dorothy's flying house. Elphaba goes manic trying to get back the shoes that her dead sister was wearing that allowed her to walk. And at the same time, the wizard takes some of her Vinkus friends hostage and kills the rest of them, and then tries to ransom out of Elphaba this ancient magical book called the Grimoire that will give him ultimate power. And he reveals to her that he is her father and he comes from another world, so she is nothing but the manifestation of the crossing of 2 different universes. And that's enough to drive anybody to madness, so I don't blame Elphaba in the slightest for how she ended up. But at this point, the wizard's propaganda is so strong that everybody in Oz is putting the blame for all of their problems solely on Elphaba, who, by the way, has completely forsaken her old name in favor of the Wicked Witch of the West, which is the title that the people have given her. But Dorothy's adventure continues. It leads her to the Wicked Witch of the West's home in the Vinkus, and the water is thrown, the witch melts, and Elphaba and the Wicked Witch of the West are gone and dead. And this has got to be like the coolest character death I've ever read. In the life of a witch, there is no after. In the ever after of a witch, there is no happily. In the story of a witch, there is no afterward. Of that part that is beyond the life story, beyond the story of the life, there is, alas, or perhaps thank mercy, no telling. She was dead, dead and gone, and all that was left of her was the carapace of her reputation for malice. That last paragraph of the book kind of suggests that Elphaba was right. Like, she really just stood for wickedness and the unnatural crossing of 2 worlds. There is no after for the Wicked Witch of the West. Oh, that's so cool. So all in all, this book is insanely complex and tragic, and here are just a few of the most prominent themes that it makes you really think about. The nature of good and evil, conscience and the soul, religion, especially as a political weapon, oppression and discrimination, and destiny, whether you can decide your own. This book is such a thinker, and it's an awesome story set in an awesome world. 100% 5 stars. But no way does all of this happen in the musical or movie, so let's see what it has to offer. I'm sorry if I look a little scary. We're in the movie theater downstairs. I just finished the book Wicked, and it was insane. This was like the most developed fantasy world I've ever read. I just watched the trailer for the movie, and if I'm being honest, there is no way that anything that happened in this book is happening in this movie. The trailer started with, "The Wicked Witch of the West is dead." But from what it looks like, if they're at the school the whole time in the movie, there are like 300 pages between that and when the Wicked Witch of the West actually dies. They're not going to happen here. I'm going in with weird expectations. Everything is different. Everything. I could sit here and list every difference between the book and the movie musical, but that would be like sitting here and listing every difference between La La Land and Rise of the Planet of the Apes because they both take place in California. They're different stories. The movie's beautiful though. Shiz College, the Emerald City, even the Ozdust Ballroom, which is a really funny PG replacement for the insanity that was a philosophy club in the book. For your sake, I can't even describe what happens in that scene. But I really like the movie as its own thing. After reading 400 pages of oppression and tragedy, it just seemed like a fun, lighthearted time. I thought that Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo were great in their roles, even if their characters were a little unrecognizable from the book. This is beautiful scenery. This song is the opposite of Elphaba's character. Their voices were great too. I think they sang on set. Let me see. They did sing on set. That's cool. But if you're a fan of the musical or the movie, I'm not sure the book is a good idea. Like, it's awesome how in-depth it is, but Also, your favorite characters are going to be met with some pretty hideous fates. There's a lot less fun school stuff and a lot more heavy revolution stuff, which I think happens in the second act of the musical. Again, still haven't seen that, and I'm waiting on the movie part 2 to come out. What I think is really strong about the movie is that it delivers on a couple of the main themes in a really approachable way. Like how it shows the negative effects of discrimination, not just on the people who are discriminated against, but on everyone. When animals aren't allowed to teach, school becomes less valuable. When people keep ostracizing and demonizing Elphaba, she fulfills that prophecy of wickedness. But it's all done in this pretty catchy package that resonates with a lot of people. However, it does lose a lot of the nuance that the book has, partially due to books just being a better medium for nuance. Like, this thing took many, many hours to read, and you cannot put all of that flowery language that makes you think into a movie, especially when you're trying to be funny at times. But the theme of religion as a political weapon is so much stronger in the book, and that really lends itself to explaining how systems can be put in place to ensure that discrimination and oppression continue. Also, Elphaba does not talk about being scared that she doesn't have a soul in the movie. Maybe in part 2, I don't know yet. And that's, I think, one of the coolest aspects of the book, so that's kind of an interesting thing to leave out. And the character of Fiyero is completely different. When people at Shiz were getting excited that a prince from the Vinkus was coming to school and like acting like he was some kind of celebrity, my jaw dropped. In the book, people from the Vinkus at Shiz College are rare, but they are not respected. Fiyero's just kind of an outsider like Elphaba the whole time. But I digress. So if you want to listen to some catchy tunes, laugh at some funny jokes, watch some unlikely friendships blossom, and learn to treat people with respect, the movie's great. But if you want to dive a little deeper, get a little tragic, think about your entire life and the universe and how good and evil fit into that, I highly recommend the book. It is awesome. Now, the answer to the question, why hasn't anybody read Wicked? It's the same answer to the question, why hasn't everybody that watched La La Land also watched Rise of the Planet of the Apes? It's a completely different story. It's a completely different feeling. It's the same place, the same people, but they're on a different journey. And things are a lot more serious in the book. But hey, if you heard me say that I read half this book in 2 hours and you're wondering how I did it, check out this video where I learned how to speed read. Otherwise, you can hear me talk about some of my other favorite books in this video where I read for 24 hours. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like and comment and all the good things. Okay, bye.